Hey guys, RG here, and welcome to our mixed media class that has been pre-recorded for you guys to be able to watch during our regular scheduled time. Now, this particular class is going to take us a little bit to get through, mainly because there's a lot of drawing time in between, and I'm going to try to speed up the process just a little bit. But of course, for you that are at home, you can take your time, maybe even let it dry overnight and then come back and catch up on the recording. That way you have your modeling paste, you've given it plenty of time to dry, and then you can continue to come back and add the various different layers. Here with me in the studio, I've got David, who's helping us do the pre-recording.
Hello.
So also keep in mind, guys, that I may be switching from different parts of the project from time to time. So let's go ahead and switch to our top view so that we can see our project for today. You have, of course, your ribbon that is going to be your closure for your book. In addition to, you've got your downloads. Let's go ahead and leave this kit in the little baggie. These are just individual sheets of cardstock, both black and white, some modeling paste, some gesso, some black paint, a larger square piece of black cardstock, and of course the two digital files that you're going to be working with today. For the purpose of this class and to speed it up a little bit, I've got smaller canvases than what you received in your kit. You should have two 5x7s. I'm going to work on smaller panels to show you the technique, and then I'm going to come back and finalize the one that's already dry when it comes to our modeling paste, just to again speed up the process. So I'm going to grab my modeling paste, and on my two canvas boards, I'm going to apply the modeling paste. You definitely want to make sure that you don't put too heavy of modeling paste because it'll take longer to dry. So make sure that you are going to cover the entire surface with a very, very thin layer of modeling paste. So just a nice smooth surface. This is almost serving the purpose of a gesso and modeling paste at the same time. We're going to do the same thing to our second panel. Nice smooth surface. This also prevents you from adding too much modeling paste. Well, you'll have some very, very soft spots in the center of your canvas. So just a nice even spread. Now that we've done that, we're going to come back and we're going to add some texture, especially around the edges of one of the panels, because remember, you're going to have all of your flowers and your bouquet right in the center. You won't be able to see too much of the center, but you are going to see that texture on the side. So just come back and unsmooth that surface. We're going to do that to both. All right. So grab them. Make sure that your edges are smooth, okay? Don't have too much modeling paste lingering over. And then you've got both of your panels pretty nice and steady. You want to make sure, again, that you are going to let them sit and let them dry. So I'm just going to kind of wipe my hands off of here a little bit. I'm going to move these to the side, and I'm going to bring in the piece that's a little bit dry, or it's been drying for a little while. You could leave them drying overnight if you wanted to. So I'm going to set this aside. Actually, I'm going to bring one up just so you can see the texture. That's on them. All right, so just kind of let those dry. Like I said, I have another piece here, which is the actual size that you're going to be working with. If in fact you want to work on this throughout the night or throughout the evening, then you can definitely go ahead and dry it with your heat tool. Modeling paste typically tends to work best if in fact it dries on its own, but the heat tool will speed up the process, especially on the outside layer. The problem with that is that it always typically dries the outside layer, but it doesn't get all the way underneath. So some of your shape or texture might be gone when you apply other pieces because it's going to tend to flatten down. So just kind of keep that in mind. Alright, so by now your canvas should be pretty dry and you've got your various different textures on it. What we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of a black wash using our black acrylic ink. Now you could decide to use a wet wipe if you'd like. I'm going to come in and just add a little bit of black. Or you can use a paper towel with water. I'm using a wet wipe. And I'm just going to kind of like stain. I'm going to stain my canvas first. Dry that. And then we're basically just going to keep adding layers. And so you kind of decide where you want your canvas to be. If you don't want it to be as striking, if you don't want it to be as black as the actual piece, then you can decide, you know what, I'm going to leave it a little bit on the white side. I'm going to leave it just a little bit of a black stain. And it just creates a really cool texture. Now I'm going to come back and do the same process again. Of course, you're going to do this to both, right? So you're going to have two different pieces to play with. But this time I'm going to use a brush, and there might still be a little bit of water left over from the wet wipe. You'll notice our stain is still there. Now we've got some heavier black pieces on here. Again, back to the drying process. And you're going to want to do this to both panels. See, what you do to one, you're going to do to the other. They're both going to be exactly the same. We're going to turn this around. We're going to grab our gesso And we're going to make sure that we cover the edges. Don't worry too much about the center panels because we're going to cover that with cardstock. But we definitely want to cover the edges because once we start adding our acrylic paint, we want to make sure it grabs that color. So we are going to try to dry that up. Now gesso, as you know, dries pretty quick, so a heat tool Now we are going to bring in that black, just a little bit, paint, and we ultimately want to make sure that our edges are black. Okay, you have plenty of paint. We want to make sure that they're black because we are going to cover the edges with the center with cardstock, and so it's just going to create a perfect blend when you add that black cardstock. And we also want to make sure that we're getting into the edges of our canvas. So, and just to give you an example, once you come back, that's going to go right on top of that. So you're just going to get a little bit of that texture on the ends. And of course, you're going to do this to both panels. So this is what we've got. And we've got our edges done. Now, we're going to grab, with our fingers, we're going to grab some of that gesso. And it's totally up to you. If you're like, I don't like to get my fingers all icky, it's perfectly all right. You can use gloves, you can use a brush, but sometimes a brush is going to give you a very, very weird look. I think I really like to come in here and just kind of get my fingers in there. You're going to get some really cool gray tones, and that texture will come out a little bit more. So just don't be afraid to get inky or have some wet wipes close by so you can quickly wipe off your hands. And now that texture's like really showing up, which is kind of cool because you've got multiple pieces. The multiple layers start to build upon each other. You've got the gesso, you've got the black, you've got that gray coming in. We're gonna come back with a little bit more black. But see how we're starting to get that look, that consistency. I might do this one just a little bit different, maybe leave a little bit more of that white so you can see the difference between the two. But you can see how we're building our layers. And you definitely have more than enough gesso and more than enough black paint for both panels. Obviously, what you do to one, you're going to want to do to the other one. I'm going to speed up the process here a little bit for us. When you get that mixture of the black and the white together is when you're going to start to get that silver tone, that gray tone. And you know what, guys? I may not add any more black to this one. I'm pretty much loving the way this looks. It looks a little marbly. And everyone's gonna look so different. So this one, of course, I came back and added more black. And I did a little bit of a wash. As you can see, you see that original stain that we did the first time around. Because I wiped it off with the baby wipe once the first layer was dry. But it's totally up to you guys in regards to, you kind of already seen all the different steps. But check it out. I may come back just with a little bit of black here. Just with a little bit of black on my corners. It can be a little bit more striking. And definitely on the back. So see the difference between the brush look and your actual fingertips coming in to create that smooth application. And it really allows you to just touch the surface of the texture, which highlights it just a little bit more. So I'm pretty excited about where that one turned out, how that one came out. And remember, you're gonna do both your panels, and now you kind of just let it sit, you let it dry, and we're gonna start to work on our digital files. Just kind of wiping my hands off here. I'm gonna put my brush away. And I'm gonna remove this grid sheet so that we can have a clean surface for our coloring of our digital files. So I'll let that sit on the side. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab our files and we get to color them. So if you haven't done that already, we're just gonna grab our markers. And of course I do a lot, I'm gonna end up doing a lot of layering here. So, and I'm also not the most particular when it comes to my coloring, as you guys know. I typically like to come in and I do an outline with a darker marker, and then I come back and I do a filler. Especially when I'm gonna do all the things that I do to my files. So what I mean by that is I come back and I add texture and I add resin and I add sparkles. So my coloring is not necessarily the highlight. It's just for color, and it brings what really brings my images to life is more my texture and my add-ons. And since I'm going to do a few roses, I'm just going to do everything that I'm going to do red. All at once. So that was R46. And then I'm just coming with a little bit lighter of a red. And this is R27. Now, for those of you that are color enthusiasts, of course, you don't have to add all the sparkles or the texture. If you're like, you know what, I want my coloring to be the biggest showcase in my project, then by all means, feel free to color away and not worry too much about adding the dimension, which is what we're gonna do once we're done with all of our coloring and cutting. Don't worry too much about that because of course your biggest highlight is your coloring. So, alright, so we are done with our reds. I'm gonna come back and add my greens. Don't worry too much about trying to stay within the lines because we're going to do a lot of cutting and a lot of layering. I'm going to finalize this with my lighter tone. I am going to purposely go outside of the line with this green because it'll help create a little bit of an outer glow once I go in there and cut, especially in between those little areas that I don't necessarily want or that I want to get too detailed on. This kind of helps bridge that a little bit. My marker seems to be drying out here a little bit. All right, so we've added our green, we've added our red. Now we're gonna bring in some orange. So we are gonna start with our darkest orange. like I said, don't stress out too much about trying to stay within the line. So we're going to do so much cutting. We're going to bring in some yellows. What's so great about this yellow orange is because we're using reds and oranges around it, just creates a really, really cool blend. And I am pushing for an all yellow Easter lily right here in the center. Our pinks are gonna be over here with our beautiful bloom. Just some beautiful petals on this one. And then lastly, we have our iris. And I am bringing in the purple tones such a beautiful flower. I love the way that the petals kind of just create a skirt. And we're all set. How about that coloring, David?
I like it. It was really nice. The shading and just reflects off of.
So crazy, huh? Just like snap, crackle, pop. Now we get to cut these guys all out. Now, I could have used a scan and cut, but I didn't. Why didn't I? Now, if you noticed on the book, I actually cut these guys all out. Create the love. Capture the love, sorry. Our panel is completely dry. And beautiful. And now I get to cut these all out, David. What? You want help? Wow, that's really kind. Let me give you the easy ones.
I don't see any extra scissors here.
Oh.
So, I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to give you all the easy ones. Are you done with those yet?
I don't have these scissors.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Do you want like a lot of border?
No, we're going to try to...
No border?
Just a teeny tiny little smidget.
Like how teeny tiny is teeny tiny.
Wow. I can't wait to see your guys' projects. I'm sure they're all going to come out slightly different because you might decide to go with a different color palette, or you might decide you want to highlight your coloring versus the dimension. The texture of the canvases is always fun to work with. Beautiful. Now, because these are going to be tucked in, I'm not too crazy about like keeping the stems intact or even the cutting. We're going to add quite a bit of texture to them. They're there to help build fluff to our bouquet.
Is that cool?
Yeah. So pretty. Almost done, David?
I'm on the third one.
Now, most of this one actually ends up getting hidden. So it's totally up to you guys. If you're not using a scan and cut, if you don't want to cut the whole thing out, I totally understand. I'm just gonna do it because I'd love to have it available in the event that I want it. All right. Now I'm gonna cut into the biggest bouquet. And remember I talked about going outside the line a little bit because it creates a nice little glow. Sorry guys, it's like intense cutting, so want to make sure I don't say anything while and then end up being a cut a petal off or something. If you use the PDF version that's not outlined, you can totally also use this large bouquet as a card front and just trim it to size as a layer. That would look absolutely beautiful. Alright, so we've got all our beautiful flowers here. I'm just going to jump onto the sentiment real quick so I can start creating my layers. Now the reason why I separate the two is because I don't want so much white in between. How did those go, David?
Alright, my hand's a little bit cramped with these tiny little scissors, but they look good because I cut them, obviously.
Obviously. So tomorrow is my oldest son's 23rd birthday, guys. Or actually, I should say today for you guys. When you guys get to watch this video, it'll already be tomorrow. So, yeah. He was born on September 19th.
He's old.
23 years old, heavens. Firstborn, so you can imagine that kind of stays pretty vivid in your memory bank. Being 17 years old at the time, and my first potato was about to be born. So this is probably just as tedious as waiting for everything to dry. But once it's done, you end up with a beautiful piece. What's so great is that while we're cutting and coloring, you can watch TV, listen to some music. I'm not a good TV watcher and crafter, but I love listening to something. So like music preferably, but if it's a good podcast or book, audiobook. Alrighty, I think we are all cut out. And we're ready to start putting our book together. Good job, David. Look at you.
Wow.
All right. So remember, I only did one panel, guys, but it's pretty much a no-brainer. Once you do one side, you're gonna just come back and do the other. So we're gonna bring in a score tool because we need to score the largest piece of black cardstock, which pretty much covers your entire top and bottom of the book. So I believe you were given a full square. You're not. So you have a 7 by 3/4. So let's just make sure we want it on the shorter side, okay? So on the 6 3/4 side, so the 6 3/4, we're gonna start by bringing it to 1.5 inches. And we're going to create a score mark at 1.5 inches. So go ahead and create that score mark. Now, at every inch, we're going to create a score mark. So 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, and you should be left with another 1.5. So you should have 1.5 on each side, and then you should have 1, 2, 3, so a total of 4 1-inch scores. Does that make sense what I just said? So 1.5, 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch, 1.5. That's our accordion for, let me give you this, for our book. So once we've got that, let's go ahead and fold those score lines. Now, sometimes because of the accordion and the folding of the paper, you end up with a little bit of extra cardstock as you're creating your pages. So just be prepared to cut those through. What might prevent the issue is if you cut them significantly smaller. I don't like to do that because I feel like they end up being too short sometimes, but this is what you want. You want an accordion that has 2 mountains and 4 valleys. Okay? 2 mountains, 4 valleys. All right. So with some score tape, let's move that out of the side. You know what? I think my score tape stayed in the... Can you go get my score tape, please, from the... So you've got your ribbon. You basically want to place it right in the center, fold it in half behind the album, and we're going to adhere this all the way down to the edge using some score tape. So bring it all the way to the edge of the canvas, okay? So don't bring it inwards, bring it all the way to the edge, and just go ahead and adhere that with some score tape. So I'm going to place some score tape here. Now I like to use a little bit of liquid glue as well. So I'm going to put 2 layers, actually let's do 3 layers of score tape. But because I am using ribbon, I'm also going to come back and add a little bit of liquid glue. Now remember, leave that in the center. And then once it's in the center, you're going to bring this all the way to the edge of your book. And I totally forgot to put the liquid glue. But if you wanted to, you can add a little bit of liquid glue in the end. It helps in case the scores tape ever wants to come off. Your liquid glue really grabs on. All right. So we've got that down. Now you're going to want to grab one of those panels to cover the other side of that book. So again, you're going to add some score tape. And we will not forget to add the liquid glue this time. Right, David?
No.
We will not forget. You can also use red liner if you have red liner tape. Or if you just want to use liquid glue, you're more than welcome to do that. The only thing is that you have to be a little bit more patient because the liquid glue takes longer to dry. I try not to use too much liquid glue. It's not my favorite, in all honesty, guys. Mainly because it warps my cardstock. It gets a little wonky, but just because we've got some ribbon on here, we're gonna just add a little bit of liquid glue. I'm not the biggest fan. Of liquid glue. So we're gonna add some on there. Make sure our cardstock is nice and smooth. Bring it right over. Smooth that liquid glue. Let your score tape do its thing. Perfect. Now you're going to want to do the exact same thing to the other side, right? So now you're going to want to bring this guy around. You have your other panel, and you're going to do the exact same thing. Make sure that when you adhere that on your other panel, it's close to that panel. So see that my gap in between is very, very minimal, about maybe 1/8. Actually, if you have our RG Studio 360 grid, go ahead and do that. So line it up to one of your lines on the grid, and then bring back the other one. And halfway through your cubby or your little squares, you're going to place your additional canvas. Or if you decide you can go a whole 1/4 of an inch, but I think that's way too much, just go halfway through. And then you're gonna do the glue. We're gonna adhere that down, and then we're gonna add that other panel right on top. So that gives you both sides, okay? I just don't have the other side made, but ideally you get the picture. But I am gonna show you how to add the pages. So you've got a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 panels. So obviously 2 go on the ends. So this one's gonna be the other book cover, and so it's attached here, right? And then you've got 4 for your inner pages. One goes on one side, one goes on the other. So the best way to do this is we're going to start with our white liner. Now for this one, you no longer need wet glue, just because it's a little bit of a messy process. And we're going to start off by adding white liner or score tape to your center page. What works really well here, guys, is if you actually start layering them on the page. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to bring in my page, and I'm going to bring in, and I'm going to layer in. Perfect. My one page is attached. I'm now going to fold. So see how the one page is attached? I'm now going to fold. And now I'm going to add score tape to this entire page. Super simple. Once you guys get this, you're gonna want to create mini books like crazy. I do try to be a little bit more generous with my score tape. How long have we been, David? I want to make sure that I'm not just lagging it here.
In 10 seconds, going to be in an hour.
All right, guys. Almost there. Bear with me. I know, it was all that coloring and cutting. So next piece, we're going to fold in, and we're going to start by bringing it to that score line, edge to edge, right? And then we're going to work it through that other page. So this just thickens that one single page, but it also starts to close your accordion. See, it can't go further than that, because now you've got a double page perfectly aligned all the way around, and you're not infringing on your folds, okay? We're gonna do it again. We're gonna start by, and you can make your accordion as long as you want. I recommend that you give yourself a full inch so that your cardstock has a good grip and it doesn't easily tear, especially since it's a mini book. People are going to want to play with it, go through the pages. We're going to bring in our cardstock, line it up, and fold that over. And we've got our second page. You guys loving this? Super simple. Now I do apologize, guys, I don't have that second canvas. I wanted to make sure that we had time because I knew this was going to be a long class. And I wanted to save myself as much time as possible. I figured you guys would understand what you do on one side, you're doing exactly on the other side. Easy peasy. All right. Again, we're going to bring it to that score line and flat out. Perfect. Perfectly aligned all the way around. And now we've got both our pages. So lastly is going to be this guy that goes right onto here and onto your second panel, right? It goes onto your panel. And at this point, you would have a complete book that looks like this. So you've got a couple of spreads. Now, the reason why I gave you guys 2 additional white pieces of cardstock is to hide the bump from the ribbon. So you've got 2 additional pieces of white cardstock to create a little bit of a liner. Now, I'm not going to adhere these because if you want to write on these, I recommend that you do that prior to attaching it. So maybe you want to do a little bit of journaling and add photographs to your 4 pages. I would. And so what I would do is I would add my journaling. And then once I've added my journaling, I'll adhere it here, maybe with some foam squares so it's a little bit raised up. Maybe even add a little photograph that's going to overlap into both the black and the white. And so then you can start your photograph. You could even do photo collages, so different photos, especially because it's a black mat in the back. I think it would be super cool. But you have one for each side to cover that bulge of the ribbon or that bump of the ribbon. So beautiful, beautiful. Of course, now we have the front, which is what we're going to work on next. All right, so we've got our largest piece first. When in doubt, pop it out. We're going to pop this guy right out using some foam squares. I am adding foam squares directly to the paint. Beautiful. Look how beautiful that background came out. And again, they're all going to be a little different. I'm going to go this way and right in the center. And again, you're hiding that, but look how beautiful that looks as you're bringing in the different bells and whistles. Now, what's so great about this, guys, is that we've got all of these beautiful pieces to layer. So what we're gonna do, if you saw my live from yesterday, is we're gonna spritz these with a little bit of water. And we're going to crinkle them just enough to create some texture, okay? So again, that's why I'm not always too concerned about my coloring, because I end up coming back and I create quite a bit of texture in my pieces. But I do love the way the alcohol markers stay vibrant on my digitals, and how despite the fact that we're adding this texture, they highlight and showcase so well. And some are going to go on the top and some are going to go on the bottom. Now ideally you want to let these dry all the way through. We don't have the time for that during this recorded version, so and it's not something I could have done really ahead of time. So I'm just going to give them just a couple of minutes. Then we're going to jump right into gluing them on, even though they're not at 100% dry. I do run the risk a little bit of them trying to go back to normal into their, you know, they flatten out a little bit, but let's just give them a minute. All right, guys. So what I'm going to start to do here is I am going to start to layer the various different flowers. Let me see if I can give it a little bit of a boost here. Just so it's not so wet. Look how beautiful they turned out. And the dimension on them is pretty amazing. What a beautiful, like, this would have been a great photo. Just all the flowers. Right? You know what? Photo op while they're still drying. I mean, they're still drying, guys. It's not like you guys are going anywhere. I'm gonna place, do a photo op, photo op. David, I need you to come take this photo.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. Look, guys, you get to witness a photo that I'm gonna post on my social channels.
Like portrait mode or square?
No, like right on top, like you do, like we do for. But I'm gonna need you to place these flowers on top of my other hand.
What do you mean?
Yeah, place them.
Those?
Yeah, to cover. Yeah, like. Really, on top of the petals.
Oh.
Wow. Yeah. There you go. Over here, don't you see the gap? Hi, children. Okay, now I'll take the photo.
How?
You from the top, like yeah.
Okay.
Nice and pretty.
That.
Here, use the stool. Sorry, guys. This is just total. I had to. Now you guys will know the story behind this photo. Ready? You can place it under the camera.
Like
They
how
don't
much?
mind.
How much like
Yeah,
hand
like
do you
that.
want?
Yeah, like that. Sweet. Ah. All right. So now that we've done that. Pretty, huh? It's like fresh cut flowers. All right, so what we're gonna do, guys, is we're gonna use liquid glue. We were just actually trying to buy time to let them dry a little bit more. But I am gonna use liquid glue, not that much, to start stuffing. And I do want to mention, so I'm almost gonna like offset it a little bit from the original flower at the bottom. Because again, our goal, and you might decide you wanna place yours just a little bit differently every time. Like this one's probably gonna be different than the first time I did this. For sure it's already gonna be different because I have a lot more of this one showing. But I think that's the beauty of it all, is that as you continue to create your beautiful layers, look at that. Ugh. So yummy. And that's why you notice I added I added my foam squares a little bit more towards the center so that I can tuck in some of these pretties from the back. Beautiful. Now these might still be a little wet, but It's okay. And again, it's that texture that you've got all that beautiful, beautiful background at the bottom. Look how yummy and chunky that is, guys. Ugh. So beautiful. Now, of course, these also go on with liquid glue. And they almost just kind of like fall into place. Let the glue do its thing, let it dry. Don't mess with it. Don't try to add any of your glaze or resin immediately. Let all the pieces dry at 100%. It'll be worth the wait. So this is the part where I recommend you just leave it. Let it dry. Once it's completely dry, you make the decision, guys. Do you want to add glaze? I think it... I thought my stool was right there. There went my leg. Oh my gosh. Do you want to add the glaze? It's beautiful. It's beautiful just as it is. I did go back and I covered the area where the blooms are and I added white splatter. So let me show you my original. This one has glaze. And I love the glaze on it, don't get me wrong, but it almost takes away some of the realness. And I understand they're not real flowers, but it looks so real without the glaze. This is the glaze. It looks beautiful. It looks like an acrylic piece. This, no glaze, has a little bit more of a realness to it. That's absolutely striking. Right?
I think I like the glazed one better. It just looks...
Yeah, it looks like an acrylic piece. But check out the splatter on the edges. And of course you would just tie your book and it's all set. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today for this class. I know it was a little long one. I was trying to cut it within the hour, but that doesn't always work out. I hope that you're excited to dive into this project. It's a beautiful project and one that hopefully you'll keep for years and years to come. Guys, this was our last Mixed Media Club without stamps. God willing, everything just falls into place in the next few weeks, and we'll be able to ship your next Mixed Media class, where moving forward, all of our Mixed Media classes or all of our Mixed Media subscriptions are going to include a stamp set and a stencil. And then we're going to play with a stamp set and a brand new stamp set and a stencil every single month, as well as digital files. So if you're subscribed to only the digital files, you'll still have the opportunity to follow along because you'll get a digital file that's going to bring to life what we're going to be using as a stamp set. There might be some variances that we're going to help kind of walk you through, but ideally you're going to have just as much fun as for those that are receiving the kit in the mail with a stamp and a stencil. As well as in that digital file, we might send you the stencil digital file so that if you wanted to cut out and recreate some of those pieces, you should be able to do that just the same. So guys, thank you so much for being the best part of RG Studio 360. I hope you've enjoyed all of our mixed media classes the entire year long. They've been a blast. We've learned so much. I can't wait to share with you our mixed media class for the month of October. It's going to be amazing, and we'll definitely catch you next time. Thanks again for joining us. Remember to continue to create and capture so that we can bring hope to those around one. Buenas noches.